Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest today is Rhett Power. Those of you who know the show, that we focus on what's often called the soft stuff, grace, the caring, the commitment, and the respect we exert toward others. And when you do it as a leader, as you will find out that my friend and colleague Rhett Power is, you bring people together for common cause and you energize them with the power of your purpose. Welcome, Rhett Power. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
John, it is great to be with you, man. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, I want to tell everybody about you. And honestly, to be honest with you, and folks, you need to know this, I probably wouldn't have this show. And maybe that would be a good thing if it weren't for my friend Rhett, because Rhett and I started doing a LinkedIn Live show last year together. And that exposure enabled me to get this gig. So I am grateful to you, Rhett. So thank you. So anyway, Rhett founded a company called Wild Creations and quickly built a startup in 2010 to the fastest growing business in South Carolina. You were a Blue Ribbon Award top U.S. company by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and you were on the Inc. magazine's 500 fastest growing companies. You and your team have won over 40 national awards. You are an Entrepreneur of the Year and many, many other things. In 2019, like me, you joined Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches, and you're a #1 thought leader in entrepreneurship, and you're also a fellow at the Institute of Coaching at McLean, and you're a co-founder of a company that I knew about, but didn't know you were involved. Shame on me. That's how humble Rhett is. It's called Courageous Leadership, which is a consultancy firm that helps you believe again. And what I draw so much inspiration and wisdom from Rhett is he's been in the saddle. He is a leader and an entrepreneur, and he makes things happen. He's also a best-selling book author. His book, The Entrepreneur's Book of Actions, is just a gem because it's packed with all the advice that entrepreneurs need to start a successful business. And it's just a gem. Rhett also contributes to Inc., Forbes, and Thrive Global, and other places. Welcome, Rhett. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Man, it's good to be with you, John. I mean, we're kindred spirits, colleagues, and so I learn so much from you, man. It's not even funny on a weekly basis. So it's good to be with you.
Great, Rhett. We're in an upside down world, a phrase that you've heard me use before. So what are you hearing from executives?
I think everybody's tired. I think this has just been, we've talked about this until we're blue in the face on many different forums. But, people are unsure. They're still unsure. Now the anxiety is I've got everybody coming back to work. How do I deal with that? I think we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. How do you plan in an environment like this where you don't know? I mean, all the TV pundits say, well, this is going to be a massive year. It's going to explode. Retail is going to come roaring back and, all that's going to happen. But we don't know when. We don't know if that's true. We don't, so I think the thing that I hear the most is just a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress about what's next and what's going to happen next and how that's going to all unfold. They spent almost a year trying to hold it all together and maybe even in a lot of cases rethink the way they do business and how they do business. And now all of a sudden that's going to change again. And so I think there's a lot of anxiety, but I think there's also a lot of optimism. I hear sort of a collective relief that, that things are going to go back to some semblance of normal, because I think everybody's a little stir crazy. But I think there's a new definition of what that is. But I think that's what you hear. And I'm sure you're hearing the same thing in your coaching and in the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. And toward that end, we are going to go back to the office. So, here's a topic, and there's one thing, Rhett, you have written about. What should we be thinking about as we prepare to go back to the office?
I think it's a great question, and I think you better have been thinking about it. I think resisting the oversimplifying safety measures. What I mean by that is, have a plan and have a safety plan, and stick to it, enforce it. Have a work from home strategy. Not everybody's still going to be comfortable coming back to the office. I've got a 14-year-old, we're going to talk about that in a little while, a 15-year-old who has health issues. He's got some pre-existing stuff. He can't be vaccinated. He can't get the vaccine yet, right? And so I don't know that I'm entirely comfortable going back out and resuming a full schedule until I know that, he's protected. So, you got to understand where your people are coming from and where they are in all this, and respect that, and work and have a plan to deal with that, because not everybody's going to be willing and wanting to come back. And do you need everybody to come back?
That's a big question. That's what I'm hearing more and more. I think people will have a hybrid workplace, but I think they're going to need a much smaller footprint. Right. What you're hearing, what I'm hearing is, and I'm glad you mentioned this, is plan. But I think inherent, and this is what you excel at as an entrepreneur, is yes, the plan, but be flexible.
Right. And I think the other issue too that we don't hear a lot about, and I was actually having a conversation, and that's why I brought it up, is I was having a conversation with this organizational psychologist the other day, and she said, Rhett, be prepared for this, the workforce to, when they do come back, not to be fully engaged. Don't expect for you to jump right back into the way things were, right? People their heads are still at home. Their heads are still somewhere else often. And that's okay. Just don't expect the same sort of engagement and attention and focus that maybe you had pre-pandemic, and expect that there's going to be a little bit of, people might be sitting in a chair, but they also might be somewhere else, and just
that's a really powerful point. And I think that being dislocated from your place of work for over a year has side effects. Some are positive and some are negative, and some, as your psychologist told us, are yet to be determined. And that's where, from a leadership standpoint, leaders need to be aware that everything's not going to be hunky-dory when we open the doors again. So.
Well, that goes in, and we can talk about this in a little while. We were going to talk about communication, I think, but that goes to, this divided society that we're in, right? Where, if you have an office of any size, even small offices, you're guaranteed to have people on either side of that divide. And so understanding that and understanding how you've got to work really hard to bridge the divide, because as people haven't been in the office. So when I'm in the office every day, I'm constantly reminded of my purpose and why I'm there. We've been out of the office for over a year, so not everybody's really truly focused on why we're here, what we're doing, and the whole purpose, right? So you've got to take some time to build that back up and to get people back their headspace and back into why they're there. And that's going to take some extra work, because right now we're not communicating well as a society or as a people, and on multiple levels. And I was talking to an HR person the other day, and she said, it's up like 70%, 75% or something, where people are coming into HR offices around the country and saying, I can't work with that person anymore because of this or that, or what they said or what they believe. And that's a real problem. And so addressing that as people start to come back, and understanding that this has been a pretty divisive year. And no matter where you come down on the politics or the mask wearing or whatever it is, you're going to have some tension that you're going to have to deal with. So addressing that up front is really critical.
We might as well jump into this. And I think and you and I have talked many, many conversations about this, the divide in which our company, that our country, split our country. And once upon a time, we may have been in one party or another, or an independent. But what we all agreed upon was a set of norms, a set of facts. Today, there is no standardized thing. Well, there are facts, another side will regard them as nothing more than opinions. And I think the sad legacy of what's happening to now is the disregarding of truth. It doesn't matter what side you're on. If you can't agree with what's real, what's empirical, then we have real problems. We're back in the Middle Ages. And that's going to be very difficult. And I think I'm sorry you raised this issue, but I'm glad you did. But this will, of course, have an effect on the workplace. And something I've saw before with the idea of the concept of disregarding which we don't like makes organizational transformation or organizational initiatives all that much harder, because we can just say, I don't believe that it'll pass, which is always a normal reaction. But now maybe there's substance to it, and that's very dangerous. So,
yeah, no, you're right. You're right. It's extremely dangerous.
And what we're going to need is men and women of courage. So tell us about the company that I didn't know you were affiliated with, called Courageous Leadership.
Well, look, most companies or most consultancies, and we know a lot of them, and I've worked with a lot of consultants. They often make you think, right? I think the difference with Courageous is that we make you not only think, but we make you feel and do. Now, we believe that there are three tenets of the definition of the word courage: knowledge, faith, and action. And we've all worked in organizations, and we've all done it as leaders and in our personal lives, where we're in this paralysis, right? And whether we're ignoring a problem or not speaking up when we really need to speak up, or we're not taking on a personnel issue that we know is a problem, and we've all been in those situations where we know what we should do, we believe what we should do, but we don't do it anyway. We've all been there. We're all guilty of it. And the problem that to me is when you have a company doing that, you have paralysis, and a lot of companies are suffering from paralysis. You look at we call it the business apocalypse, right? The Fortune 500.
I like that. Yeah.
You used to be on the Fortune 500 list for 70, 75 years or something crazy like that, right? That was the average lifespan of a Fortune 500 company. It's 11 or 12 years now, right?
Crazy. Isn't that crazy? Absolutely. Yes.
These legacy companies are getting disrupted right and left. The average lifespan of a CEO or CMO or a C-suite executive is not going up; it's going down. Right?
CEOs have the lifespan of an NFL running back.
Exactly.
3 seasons out of there. So
we're done, right? And our mentor, our good friend Marshall Goldsmith says, what got you here won't get you there. And we're also not wired for change. We're wired to fear change. We're wired that way as people. And so for us, our job is to take knowledge, faith, and action, and to help companies get out of that mode of paralysis, to help get them out of this cycle that a lot of companies are in, where they're trying to protect everything that they've got, right? This ownership of this niche or this product or this market segment, and break out of that segment, or break out of that mindset, and have a more courageous culture, be a more courageous leader. And so, we find a lot of companies are just in this paralysis mode. So we help them break out of that. We help put a process around courageous culture, courageous action, courageous leadership by using knowledge, faith, and action. So knowledge, if you have the information, if you have a good data collection and good analysis and good information in your company, and you know what you need to do, and the data says it. If you have faith, well, we believe faith is believership. Do the employees believe in the mission, the where you're going, where you're headed? Does the leadership believe in that's the right thing to do? And then the hang up for a lot of companies is the action part. And so we help put a process around that action part and help companies break through and create that action plan for those tough things that they've got to do. And that's what it is. That's what we do. It's what we work with big companies and small to do that and to move forward and break some of those cycles that they find themselves in.
That's fascinating. And I like the idea of the belief in our collective powers and stuff. And as you were touching on the theme, I mean, the root concept of your organization is courage. And so often we talk about courage now as speaking truth to power and as upward directed. But equally, and that gets back to what we just talked about with a divide in our culture. If I'm a boss and I'm seeing the proliferation of false information, fake news, whatever it is about any issue, and not to get into the partisanship of it, but to say, no, that's not the kind of culture we are. These are the values that we adhere to. I stand up for them. And I think that's important. Would you not agree, Rhett? So.
Oh, I think we have to. And I mean, you look at what's going on, and I don't know if you wanted to go there, but you look at what's going on with Delta and, Major League Baseball and some of these organizations. I think that the political climate that we're in and the environment that we're in, it's making people make choices. I go back to this story that I just remember vividly. My mother-in-law was a small business owner in South Carolina, very successful for 20, 30 years. And she was a very political person. She had a point of view and something that she believed. But I remember that when we were starting the toy company, she said, Rhett, you have beliefs and you're pretty strong in what you believe and what you think. She said, but you can never wear that on your sleeve. You can never put that yard sign. She was talking about physically and in other ways. You can't put that yard sign out in front of the store, And I think, I took that and I believed that for a long time, but
I think we all do. Yeah.
Yeah. And I haven't once discussed politics with my clients. Right. But as a company, as a brand like Coca-Cola or Major League Baseball, Delta Airlines, I applaud them, Nike, and I applaud them for taking these stands. I think that they've been forced we're in a position in our place in our society where you can't sit on the sidelines anymore.
And it's a part of a values proposition. And right. And interestingly enough, corporations that you mentioned are doing this. Why? Because that's what they know what their customers want them to do, or the majority of them. And not just their customers, their employees. And we're kind of in a crazy upside down world in the last few years where corporate America is leading the way in social justice, racial equality, all of these issues, because our government too often is paralyzed by partisanship. So it's the private sector which is stepping forward. But it's more than just the private sector, I think, because it's also consumers are weighing in. And you and I have known this for years. We want to patronize companies that espouse our values. And if they don't, well, we'll find someplace else. So
I do it. I'm not guilty. I'm guilty of that. If I don't go to a certain sub shop because the owner of that sub shop or the owner of that franchise, goes over to Africa and shoots, elephant and giraffe. I don't believe in that. I don't think that's that, and so I don't go to the sub shop. I like their subs. It's a shame, but that's what it is now. And I'm glad I know that. Yeah. I'm actually, but we expect certain behavior of where we spend our money. We expect, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think it gets to your value proposition, which is rooted in your purpose, and we all laud purpose. And but if we find that one company or another or whatever, a group of people is not adhering to our perspective, which is within their rights, with the exception of hate, or bigotry, say, it's not our, it's let's separate, but and so the values are what matters. Know what you stand for and know what you're willing to stand up for, I think, and that gets to your theme of what it is how you practice, and I know this in your how you do it, and it's a matter of courage. So.
It is. I mean, courage is a prerequisite for change. I wholeheartedly believe that. And
it's a good way of looking at it, and because the old saying, and it was from Rosa Beth Moss Cantor, who was the kind of doyen of change. She's still at Harvard Business School. She said, "I hate change," and she's written about change more than anyone. But it's all what she was getting to is the idea of we only change when it hurts too much not to change.
That's right.
And the other thing is, while we're on this thing, let's look at the founding of America. As John Adams once said, he said, a third of us were true blue, a third of us were Tory, and a third of us were sitting on the fence waiting to see which side won. I mean, that's kind of the dictum for all change processes. And we have to, from a leadership standpoint, we have to understand that. And when you're persuading people, you have to find ways to get that middle to you until you have momentum. Would you not agree, Rhett? So
100%. 100%.
So you wrote an interesting post, speaking of courage, but lessons and where we are today. What can businesses learn from healthcare? I mean, healthcare is a business, but what can we learn from that? So,
I think a couple things. McKinsey did this study, I think early on in the pandemic about, and then they surveyed CEOs and leaders, and they said, how long is COVID going to change your business? And I think the response was something like, over the next 5 years, COVID was going to have a huge impact in the way we do business. And I think there have been a lot of lessons learned. You look at this unprecedented cooperation in the healthcare industry, and particularly in the vaccine side. And it has been just remarkable. You and I are on this weekly call with Marshall and with MG100. And, I remember early on in the pandemic having Sophie Patel and we had a slew of doctors, Julie Rosenberg and all talking about how the unprecedented amount of cooperation in the healthcare side. And so I think, that's a lesson learned. Whether people use it coming out of COVID is another thing, but I think that's something that unprecedented cooperation was really key to making that, to having that progress that we had on the vaccine. I think we learned that speed matters. That you fail fast, you learn those lessons really fast, and you move really fast. One of the healthcare companies that I work with, within a matter of days, put up a system to do telemedicine, and so they really dove headfirst into the technology side of this to see how technology could really help them deliver world-class healthcare and continue to do it while people couldn't come in to a clinic or into the hospital. So I think we learned a lot of lessons about from healthcare about speed and using technology. I mean, the growth in telemedicine has just been phenomenal, and a lot of people that I've talked to have said this wouldn't have happened without COVID. We wouldn't have been where we are. It would have taken us another 5 or 10 years to get to this level of where we are now. And that's going to allow them to provide services to more rural communities and to places that they were really struggling to reach before. So I think the lesson there is don't ignore the technology, embrace it, fail fast, implement quickly, innovate quickly, and find out if things are going to work. And then I think always be prepared. I mean, so many stories of disruptions in supply chains, right? And so learning that having an alternate plan, I remember as a CEO, we had one supplier of one of our key products, when they failed and when they had a problem and a disruption in their service, it impacted ours and the whole downstream of our business. And so we learned from that, never have just one supplier, have a plan B. And so I think that this taught people that lesson, and not to be complacent, to embrace that idea of change as a constant, and make sure that that's something that you just embrace as a company, and you're always thinking about what could happen, what's next, and having at least a game plan in the book, so that if something happens, you can turn to page 8 or 9 or 10 or 100 and say, here's plan B. Here, this happens, so we're going to do this.
And that's such a powerful thought. And here's the interesting thing, that as you were ticking through these, which are very action-oriented steps, you can sum them up with a flexibility, adaptability, preparation, but re-prepare, the move to innovate, telehealth, all of these things are around. Something deeper, and I think it's something that you and I have talked about, as we look back on this crisis, which let's hope we're coming out of, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train, oncoming train. What we cannot let the lessons of what we've learned, both practical and strategic, as you itemized, but also on ourselves, what we've learned about ourselves. And so much of this is, and I know that this is something that you work with your clients, the concept of resilience. We're stronger than we might have believed. Would you not agree, Rhett? So,
I think we are much stronger than we believe, and that we even know. And I think this pandemic has been a prime example of that, of how strong we can be. I mean, you talk to a lot of companies, and productivity's gone through the roof. So we are stronger. We are more resilient. We can tolerate and take a lot. It doesn't mean that you can't ignore your people, and we can talk about that if you want. But it doesn't mean that as a leader you don't have to pay attention to resilience and to how you're driving your team.
Right. And there's a concept of resilience that was shared to me by my colleague, Jessie Lynn Stoner, and she was quoting her colleague, Eileen McDarg, about it's a bouncing forward too. And then as Jessie talked about it, it's also a transformation. The world we left is not the same as the world we'll come back to. I mean, we're still in the world now, of course, but our new reality, our hybrid workplace, our work from anywhere, whatever that means. And so we're going to need good thinking. And we're also going to need something else. And I know you have a story. It's something about grace. Tell us about that, Rhett. So.
Yeah. Your program and you, this is, you talk about grace a lot and all you do. I love how you beautifully tie grace into your work and how important it is in our daily lives, whether it's with family and friends or whether it's with colleagues and people that we lead. And I'll tell you a story about grace from my view. So my youngest son, and this is where I learned what grace really means, and what and how to be lead a life of being grateful and showing grace. So my youngest son is now 15, but he was born with some severe. He had what's called a congenital diaphragmatic hernia, and the night he was born, he was rushed to. We didn't see this prior to his being born, which you normally do. So he was born in a normal hospital, and he had to be rushed to a children's hospital right after birth, and they had to keep him alive until they could put him on what's called an ECMO machine. And I remember the surgeon who was a former and the neonatal doctor there in NICU, was a big burly former college football player. He probably 6'3" or 6'4", big guy. He said to me, Rhett, you need to make preparations for him to pass away. He's probably not going to make it through the night. And, he put his arm around me and he said that. And, that was just a gut punch, right? Just an absolute gut punch. And, we were already terrified what was going on, seeing your child in this state. And so anyway, he's a 15-year-old, smart, articulate, talented young man. But he's had a lot of these hospital stays. We had to evacuate him. We were down in Central America, and he had a bowel obstruction. We had to fly him on a jet to Miami Children's Hospital to operate and to go through that. And he's just had so many of these things that come up. He had RSV a few months into, after coming out of the hospital, had to go back on a ventilator. Anyway, he's had all these challenges, but he never lets any of that stop him. And every time he's been in the hospital, he's got a damn smile on his face. And he's taught me so much about grace and, just adversity, and just, so it's like he's taught me so much about what grace is and what grace and adversity is. And so that's where I've learned what that means and what that word really means.
Wow, what a loving tribute, and so powerfully told, so eloquently told, Rhett. Thank you. And grace is all around us, and we learn it from so many different sources, and learning it from one's own child, and the grace that he has shown in overcoming and dealing with adversity. Talk about resilience. That young man has quite a bit of resilience. So
yeah.
Tinged with grace. Unfortunately, we're at the end of our allotted time. So, Rhett, how can people find you? So,
RhettPower.com. You can get to our coaching. You can get to Courageous that way. You can get to the articles in the book and all that other good stuff. And Rhett is like Rhett Butler, but Power, RhettPower.com. If you caught the Gone with the Wind reference, I applaud you. So.
And you have a regular show on LinkedIn, the Power Hour, correct?
Power Lunch Live.
Sorry, I blew it. I knew it.
That's all right.
Anyway, Rhett, what an honor to have you on, and thanks for all you've done for me and the LinkedIn community for the years you've had your show. So you're a treasure to all of us. So I say thank you, my friend. And with that,
You're a treasure, man. Thank you. It's good to be with you.